Hello and welcome. We're going to give people a few more minutes here to get logged in. And while we do that, we thought we'd get to know the audience. So please let us know, what is your experience with Data Cloud? All right, some interesting results here. We're kind of across the board with levels of experience with Data Cloud. Some people already in production, which is exciting. Some kind of in the middle of figuring out what to do with credits. And a couple that are just curious and, really at the beginning of that journey. So let me go ahead and close this. All right. Welcome to the next in our series, Unlocking the Full Potential of Salesforce Data Cloud with the free credits. This is the third in a series. And before I get into the series, just a couple quick housekeeping. Everyone is on mute. We will have plenty of time at the end of the session for questions, and we encourage you to either chat us as they come up, or when we get to the Q&A section, you can raise your hand in GoToWebinar and we will unmute you so you can ask it verbally if you prefer. So this is, as I said, the third in our series around data quality and ensuring you have reliable data to power your customer 360 use cases. If you've never heard of PureNova before, and this is your first time joining us, welcome. It might be because for the last 10 years, we have been very focused on helping banks with their data quality assurance. Last year, we realized that the Salesforce community also struggles with similar data quality challenges. And so we signed up to be an ISV partner with Salesforce. Within 3 months, had launched our first app for CRM, and a few months after that, launched a Data Cloud application. There's a lot of excitement about Data Cloud, but there's also a lot of confusion and uncertainty. So our goal with this series is to help the Salesforce ecosystem really cut through that noise and figure out what's really possible today. So today we're going to talk about how do you help your business stakeholders understand the potential of Data Cloud and what's really possible and what opportunities to improve your business that holds. Show your IT leadership what is technically possible with only GA functionality, and then ultimately convince your financial stakeholders that these are initiatives that are well thought out and proven and worth funding. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers, Mehmet Orun and Alan Dre, to introduce themselves. And Alan, we'll start with you so you can cover everyone's favorite slide.
So we can cover what we do with everything. Okay, so Salesforce is a publicly traded company, so we want to make sure that our customers are focused on buying products and services that are currently available in the marketplace today. I think that's all I have to say about that.
And Alan, happy to introduce you, or we can introduce with each other, given we have been on a mutual quest to help organizations make better business decisions with better data, having a 360 view. Or since I started talking, my name is Mehmet Orun, and I've been with Salesforce. I was with Salesforce for over 10 years. Before that, I was a Salesforce customer for multiple years, 18 years in the ecosystem. As a customer, I owned an end-to-end customer 360 solution with master data management, data mart, and data warehouses, every integration technology you can probably envision. I knew what my total cost of ownership was for the various components. It was in 7 figures, multi-7 figures. And what I love about the Salesforce ecosystem, which is what took me to my Salesforce product, Salesforce data strategy lead journey, is the belief in the platform that Salesforce can make business solutions simpler to achieve by reducing the amount of development, integration, security type concerns. I presently lead our line of business for our Salesforce ecosystem. And it is a pleasure to share the stage with you again, Alan. So to you, if you would like to tell us a bit about your background.
Certainly. And I've been here at Salesforce for 12 years, alongside working with, for, and again, alongside Mehmet for the most of that 12 years, but focused on, B2B use cases in the multi-org scenarios. Recently been most involved with Data Cloud for the last 2 years. in implementing Data Cloud and working through some of the use cases for Data Cloud and the multi-cloud use cases inside of Data Cloud. And a very deep level of data background along with Mehmet, and really focusing on the data and the data issues that our customers have inside of Salesforce and beyond.
So in this session, like we did in the first two, we are going to tag team a little bit. If you have any deep dive questions on how do I achieve it from an architect's perspective, Ellen is here, and I'm here to guide you through your data management, data strategy journey. We're going to cover content for about 35 to 40 minutes, intending to leave 10 to 15 minutes for questions. We are going to baseline it with, let's look back to why Data Cloud exists versus the other technology alternatives, and what can we learn from past experiments that we should avoid when we look at Data Cloud. And that should really be the foundation for our three-step process, where we're going to go into the details of how do you identify an impactful business use case? How do you then deliver on this use case using only the free credits that is available to Enterprise Edition and above customers, and demonstrate your business use case effectively in a way you can also show the cost-benefit analysis? One of the top questions we hear at various Salesforce events is, it is great to have the free credits. How do I take advantage of them? That is the top question we are hoping to answer for you. A second related question is, okay, great, now that I understand that, how do I forecast demand? We're going to have a conversation around what you could do and the general complexity in the ecosystem, why Data Cloud can in fact make this better. With that, let's start with the baseline, why Data Cloud can be an impactful solution and the common pitfalls to avoid. In my career, I have been in IT organizations, I've been on the consulting side, I've been the customer. And one of the challenges that gets in the way most often is people that love what technology can do and deciding to invest in a technology without understanding what business use case, what business problem they would be solving first. This ends up delaying business value, best case scenario, and can cause loss of reputation or people feeling like we're not really pursuing much. So much of the recommendations here is funded by avoiding this. The second big challenge is, you know what business use case you want to go after, you have a business sponsor, but you never actually quantified what better outcomes can look like. We're going to get into this when we talk about how to effectively choose a use case and scope it out. And number three, even with the best thought out implementations or proof of concepts, not tackling the very real data quality challenges can get in the way of both business results and our own credibility when we present the recommendations. So we are going to talk about some of the most common data design and data quality pitfalls you may encounter, how to discover and how to tackle them today. At the end of the day, every single organization, whether you're a mid-market company like PeerNova or a large enterprise like Salesforce, have multiple data sources. They may have multiple clouds. They are going to have technologies from different vendors. This means different schemas, different data shapes, varying data quality levels, and customer interactions are going to be spread across all of these. Prior to Data Cloud going after the enterprise landscape, we either had purpose-built IT technologies in master data management, data lakes, data warehouses, batch, streaming, federated data integration, data profiling, and data cleansing technologies. And on average, these would take 18 months to implement, $1.2 to $5 million for the first project before they would deliver business value, with a fairly high percentage of business stakeholders not feeling like the promised value was achieved. There has also been functional focused solutions such as marketing CDPs, where Data Cloud started solving for and realized the broader business opportunity landscape. Look, at the end of the day, business leaders simply want solutions that work. IT leaders want to be able to deliver solutions that work faster, and finance leaders want to de-risk. And because this history from the right-hand side of the slide is very real in people's minds, people want to see a proof point as they are making new investment decisions and know that they can go faster.
And we really want to add that, in essence, you want things faster because the business and the business environments are changing so much faster. So the idea of getting a return on that value very quickly is important because of the movement in the business and the movement in the world today.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I love about Data Cloud personally as an architect is how many of these different technologies are all under one roof with pre-built integrations with a common user interface layer. Master data management maps to unify in the middle. Batch versus streaming capabilities have often been different technologies from different vendors. It has integrated workflows, ease of working with analytics, integration to both marketing activation solutions and CRM flows. And this capability ultimately promises to simplify the technology stack and implementation. What we want to do is help guide you through how to apply specific business challenges that this technology stack can choose. So we are going to go through this in a three-step methodology. And you're not just going to prove the concept that this can work. Your goal is to prove the value that when this works, what can you achieve for your business outcomes to justify the technology investments. Step one is selecting an impactful business use case where we want to correlate business benefits of bringing data together in a common contextual, correct, contextual and compliant way to achieve tangible business outcomes. Once we agree on what the business use case is and how to verify we have solved for it, we've made things better, then we are going to talk about how to actually build this proof of value. And last, we are going to talk about how to present some of these benefits where we have past webinar presentations that gets into the details of how to build these as well. Ellen, anything else you'd like to add before we dive into details?
No, but I mean, we should refer back to the other webinars because we did go through the build process pretty in depth in those, and we really want to focus on the use case and the good use of the free credits here, so that we can actually do the ELT or the load and transform of the data coming in for sure.
That's the promise.
Yep.
So step one, let's select an impactful use case and to establish how we would demonstrate success. If you have seen us present, if you've seen sessions on this, there are only 3 reasons a project should take place. It is tied to an effort to increase revenue, to reduce costs, or to ensure compliance. So a well-defined use case, once we come up with it, must demonstrate quantifiable business benefit that ties to one of these 3 outcomes. And we are going to give you 2 examples of it. And it is also important to remember that it is not just saying we should increase sales. That is not a business use case. That's a goal. Saying that I want to be able to support a B2C support agent so they spend less time researching a customer's needs, that can lead to customer attrition or unnecessary accommodation payments, is a business use case. Use cases are aligned to personas whose responsibility it is to achieve business outcomes. You can assess the current experience of that persona as part of a use case definition. You should quantify the as-is experience whenever possible, such as how many times they switch screens, how much time they spend looking for a piece of information, so that when you come up with that very quick wireframe that says what would an ideal experience look like, that becomes our guiding star. It becomes the verification with the business stakeholders to say, if we solve this, would your life be better? Would your team's life be better? And we can do a comparison of the business benefits at the end. Helen, anything else to add?
No, not at this point. Thanks.
For those that haven't met us, Ellen and I spent years working with customers making these reels. So we have a lot of stories if you have your own challenges to pose.
I was going to say, because as you talked about determining the experience, I was thinking ride-alongs and the ride-alongs that we've actually done in our past. So.
Oh, absolutely. So let's give two very real examples. In this example, we are working with a luxury retailer with multiple brands, and part of the company's strategy is providing white glove service to the best customers and ideally getting the tier 2 customers, where tier is determined by spend, to the top level because those tend to be the most profitable. For such a business, there could be a number of different use cases you may want to choose. For example, we can ask, so who are our top customers within and across channels? This is really very much of an analytics type of a question, tried and true for decades. We can have a more specific use case that says, do service agents consistently understand when they need to deliver white glove service? And who may be a tier 2 customer to encourage and nurture that even as part of the customer service experience. Or it could be a marketing engagement journey based on the cross-brand understanding, cross-channel understanding in order to nurture it at broader scale. I want to pause here before sharing with you what we ended up going after for this use case and why, so you can compare the way you might have chosen it to your own gut feeling. The answer for us was the service agent experience, and the reason was threefold. Just understanding who top customers were was not going to lead into a specific tangible improvement action. It was valuable, but it was not actionable. In the meantime, looking at data across brands can be powerful strategically in the long run, but if you don't understand what's happening within a single brand, you really shouldn't try to solve it across brands, which can also be more politically complicated if people do not necessarily want to share their data and figure out what the security firewalls were. Service agent experience was really the Goldilocks approach for this particular use case, where we wanted to see where do service agents struggle, because there was a perception that it wasn't the smoothest, but it was never quantified in terms of impact. Now, you might have seen this slide in past Salesforce posts, because this was a very real implementation, in fact, across multiple projects. In this particular case, what we knew was 50% plus of the e-commerce orders were guest checkouts, which naturally implied guest checkouts were not being automatically associated with a customer. And that meant the idea of top customers based on authenticators orders alone were insufficient. When we looked at this particular use case and quantified the business benefit of should we have an enterprise-wide solution, we were able to measure what it was taking for a service agent to find orders of the top tier customers, the ride along Ellen mentioned. We were able to quantify the number of unique tier 1 customers before and after a data cloud proof of value. And as a result, we were able to demonstrate what this end-to-end experience could look like as part of the Customer 360 platform. If you have any questions on B2C type use cases, please put them on the session chat.
And the service agent use case is really nice because interacting with the service agent, ultimately, you get the feeling that you've just improved their work life, right? The things that they're doing, the things that they're capable of doing. So it really became something that was much more gratifying on both sides.
And the key takeaway I'm hoping you're getting from this also is a use case is relatable. It is also quantifiable with a clear idea of how we could decompose it, even if you decompose it over different phases. To give you a B2B use case example, here's a typical enterprise customer that has multiple Salesforce CRM orgs. In this particular case, we engaged with a business that believed that in each regional instance of Salesforce, they would only be dealing with regional customers, and they assumed regional teams were not crossing boundaries with the global accounts that was being maintained in a separate org. As we started engaging with the customer about, so what would happen if this assumption was not true? The risks were about, do we need to pay commission to both reps? Are there contract compliance risks? How do we quantify this visibility? So the focus was very much fine-tuned to, let's identify where there are common accounts with open or closed opportunities across a number of these orgs. And that was the use case if you joined us for our January webinar, when we demonstrated how to build a B2B 360 hierarchy through Data Cloud and then show all the related opportunities and cases in the connected orgs. We were able to quantify, yes, in fact, there were sales made in regions to the global company because they didn't know that they were talking to a global account. The nice piece was, as we went through this exercise, we had bonus findings the data showed that was not part of the tightly scoped POC, where we said, okay, if a regional team is able to sell to an account global team did not know about, could this actually scale to a greater cross-sell, upsell potential? So you go from a few-week-long proof of concept that is well-defined with a question. Let's select a few orgs, let's look at the account on opportunities and quantify our risk, to now we can apply these learnings, having proven the technology and the business need with much greater business implications. So I hope these two very real use case examples will inspire you to find what a use case can be for you. And if you're still curious, Alan and I both have our contact information at the end to brainstorm with you. Now that we have a use case, we can apply it to solve real business challenges. Let's get into the free Data Cloud benefits, first with a baseline understanding of what does that mean. If you have Enterprise Edition or Unlimited Edition, you're entitled to 250,000 credits, where they would be consumed based on the type of data processing you do, through the chart on the left. What you see where this came from is referenced at the bottom of your screen. Naturally, the more complicated the task is, the more credits it consumes. And what you want to do is be mindful of where these credits are going and waste it as little as possible. This section is all about making those right scoping and implementation decisions to avoid waste. Querying data is the least costly process. It is 2 credits per million records. Whether you query data through an API, through SQL, through a report, through a package, it has the same baseline cost. Still, you want to be efficient because you're probably going to query the data more than any other task, even though it's the cheapest. Then you have the data transformation processes, where you have a choice. You can transform data in batch versus streaming. And in production, if you have sources that are rapidly changing, where you need to know that something has changed to provide near real-time insights, streaming would absolutely be the way to go. However, when you're using the free credits, when the goal is to prove the value, to prove technology viability and advantage over the alternatives, stick with batch, be judicious. Besides, you want to rely on a snapshot anyway, while people are poking at how well you solve the problem.
And we're going to talk about sampling and those types of things later, but this is really where you're saying, I just have to prove the data and I've got the right data to get into the system. Because you're going to do the transform, the unify, those types of things before you end up doing queries, because you haven't got data in the system to query. So you have to kind of get and make sure you're moving the right things through. And batch is basically the right way to start some of these things.
Yeah. One of the models we have is anything that is repeatable is automatable. And when you're automating, you want to really monitor to make sure things are going well before letting it run continuously as well.
Right.
Now, data unification is one of those biggest complexities that has been embedded in Data Cloud. This is your matching, identity resolution, however you refer to it. It's the piece in the middle that allows you to know that various records that come from various source systems is about the same customer or partner or supplier or employee. This is the 1.2 billion master data management solution space that has been quite difficult for companies to get right historically, where the functionality is part of Data Cloud. That said, it is also the most credit consuming process in the overall process. And what I want to highlight is if you don't look at your data ahead of time properly, if you have to repeat the step, you're going to waste 40% of your free credits. So you definitely want to look at your data to make sure you have the right design in the first place and to get this right. So that you're reserving as much credits as possible, not to bring the data together, but to demonstrate the benefit of that data for your use case, which may be in analytics, which may be in Salesforce CRM, which could be in a workflow or an activation journey.
And make sure as you're unifying these things, you basically are looking at using identifiers where you can, and then moving into the other more obscure data pieces like phone numbers and addresses, those types of things, especially in the B2B space, because they can be a little harder to get the matching done. But if you can have an identifier, it works out a little bit better.
Yeah. So there are absolutely a ton of tips and tricks that we can get into. The good news is, and again, we will say this often because we have done this, that 250,000 credits is enough to show the value for a use case. What do you do to make sure it is sufficient, however? Number one, do your data scoping to focus on what is needed to prove the value. Trying to integrate too many data sources, too many source objects, too many records is beyond the scope of verifying, can we solve a business need in a viable way? Let's focus on sufficiency. Number two, we're going to get into avoiding common data design missteps that require reprocessing, which means you're paying for the exact same thing multiple times. And then addressing obvious data quality issues that may cause people to question your credibility, even if you did everything else right. So the 5 key principles you should keep in mind is, if you're doing a proof of value project, the sufficient scope is 2 or 3 data sources. 1 is never enough, 4 is going to be too many, because you're ultimately wanting to show the hidden insights that you can bring together to solve a business need if you are bringing data from a few different sources. Then for each source, and we're going to talk about guidance for every one of these, you want to choose 3 to 5 data source objects maximum. That should be enough to capture your customer and transactional insights. You want to take the right sample data. You want to stay in 1 million records or less. You want to work with data snapshots as opposed to running data continuously, because this is a proof after all. And you want to also focus on fields that matter to be judicious with your time. So let's dive into the details of this. When we talk about right data sources, these may be selected either by the needs of the persona you identified in the earlier process, or this may be because you have a specific project initiative already that's happening. If you're dealing with a B2C use case, it is going to be combining data from Service Cloud or e-commerce. Maybe you're dealing with multiple orgs, which could be the case for B2C or B2B. Maybe you're a manufacturing company and you want to unify data from your CRM system alongside your ERP system, where you have accounts at different levels of detail in both, and you want to tie opportunities, orders, and bills. Maybe you're a company like PureNova, where our legacy line of business was running on HubSpot and Zendesk, and now that we are streamlining on Salesforce CRM, you want to do a quick assessment of what is your customer overlap so you can plan your data migration more effectively. And then specific scenarios could include an org merge project where you discover you may not need to do an org merge at all because you may have a solution faster and cheaper if you applied more of a hub and spoke mechanism. Whatever
it'll at least give you time anyway, right?
Yeah.
Rather than having to jump right to the org merge.
Yeah. Whatever the case, you're talking about 2, at most 3 business applications you want to bring together. Sorry, Alan, I was going to pass the ball to you then, but...
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped in anyway.
I know that you're passionate about people not doing unnecessary org merges, given how complicated that would be.
Well, because of the context of the instances, and you have to be careful when you're merging things. Is there was a reason for it? If it's not M&A, there was a reason for it. We have to be careful with those conversations. And Data Cloud just basically allows you to bring it together and take a look at it to really assess it.
Absolutely. So once you choose your data source, then it is time to identify the representative source objects we are going to unify to drive and power our use case. Pick 1 to 3 source objects about the customer. This may be your accounts, contacts, leads, bill to or shipped information coming from orders. Ultimately, you want to look at your customer data because that is what is going to help you determine what that overlap is. Then pick 1 or 2 transactional insights. It may be opportunities, orders, cases. Right transactional insights allow you to determine in a quantifiable way what is the business benefit or business risk of missing the fact that you have multiple customer records about the same customer. As you look at your data sources and source objects, you do want to be mindful of the data volumes. We've worked with customers that had 300 million records. We have worked with customers that had less than 1 million across multiple sources. If you have more than 1 million records overall, pick the deliberate sample that is going to be representative of the business challenge in order to guide you. So let's dive into these 3 categories as well. If you're talking about a B2B scenario where you have more than 1 million records, you want to look at your most frequent customers identified not at a name and address, but globally. You can use global ultimate DUNS number if you use DMB as a data enrichment source, or Bureau van Dijk has their own global identifier. This is going to allow you to know that Salesforce, MuleSoft, Slack, Tableau, with their geographic distribution, is still one company. And it is going to allow you to quantify the opportunity probably for your biggest and best customers where you want to be mindful the most. If you're in the B2C space, you may choose with the most common approach, which is I want to sort this by emails with the most orders. Please note that many people have multiple email addresses, or email is not always required. A better practice is taking a deep data sample from a geographic region. Maybe you pick a country, maybe you pick 1 or 2 states in the US. The reason for that is you want to see what happens when you look at email, social handle, phone number, address in a unified way to better quantify your lost opportunity. And by focusing on geography rather than just last year's worth of data, you have a much more accurate sense of the lost opportunity. Ellen, what would you like to add to this?
Yeah, the idea of sampling, again, I want to make sure that we're talking about that effective sampling. And I think you used another term yesterday, Mehmet, was more kind of deterministic sampling versus the random. We don't want random sampling. And that's really what we're driving at here, is looking at a sample that's not random, picking a set. And when you talk about geographic regions, maybe you want, if you're talking about states, you want contiguous states where people could move across boundaries. But you can get a good sample of that data that isn't random in nature.
Yeah, all of this is about being deliberate about the choices we are making.
Deliberate.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we can explain why we did what we did it with the business lens.
Right.
The next thing to be mindful of is what fields to focus on. Again, when you're doing a proof of value, you don't have to look at every single field, but you don't want to miss the most important fields. One way you can look at most important fields is fields that tend to be populated the most in your transactions. If you only have 50 fields, this may not be a big deal, but what if you're like the average Salesforce customer with 200 to 500 custom fields on your most common objects? That is a lot of time spent in data analysis and a lot of time spent making sure that you have the right design. Focus on fields that matter for your POC, establish your techniques, and then when you're putting this in production, look at the broader scope. And when you define your use cases,
you usually pick out which fields are really supporting those use cases. And you'll obviously see that those will be the fields that will be populated if indeed the business is really being supported by those use cases, by those attributes.
And Haley and I were discussing we should do a session in the future just on how do you identify fields that matter to business outcomes. So if you're curious about this, send us a note, drop a comment. If we are looking at this, you should absolutely profile your data in order to guide decisions on data content, data sampling, what fields matter. And I'm also going to suggest that you should profile data where it makes sense, being mindful of time and credit consumption. One of our products at PeerNova is called Uniform for CRM. There is a 100% free and native admin edition on AppExchange, where when you profile CRM objects at source, there is no consumption of Data Cloud credits at all, which is an advantage for you. So if you're planning your Data Cloud POC, what I recommend any customer or any partner is profile the data in your primary CRM org first, because it's going to be a microcosm of your greater enterprise data quality, data disconnect challenges. If you have less than 1 million records, or if your data sources are not Salesforce CRM, you're going to want to be able to profile them in an alternate environment. Uniform for Data Cloud gives you that capability, so you can decide to start your journey in Data Cloud as you land the data, and the data design assessments you're going to make that point forward are going to be the same anyway. So the benefits of starting in the CRM solution is if you have very large data volumes that you're going to want to subset before you onboard them in Data Cloud. Otherwise, you can start directly in Data Cloud.
And you can be context specific when you're in the CRM version. You're looking at the context. When you go to Data Cloud, you now begin to bring those contexts together, and that's really where you can really consider what needs to be harmonized and what would you have to do. And you can backtrack into the CRM data that you've found to now help and aid in that CRM instance that may be where you can do some changes as well.
Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong. The ability to subset records onboarded from Salesforce CRM to Data Cloud is not a GA capability, but it is something on the roadmap, correct?
To subset records, right now you can recognize the individual records that are coming in and being able to deal with them from a specific context.
Yeah,
sure.
So one of the reasons you may want to start with profiling in the Salesforce CRM is if you have 30 million records in your contact object, which we've seen in a number of companies, you may decide to identify which accounts and which contacts are the ones that you want to extract for your POC in a CSV. Once you prove your POC, then your full production build will take advantage of the standard connector. Those are also additional considerations you may want to make.
Right. All right. So you're talking about filtering on the way in. So yes, if you can make that decisions and some of those decisions downstream so that you can ultimately just bring in sets of data. And as you pointed out before, Mehmet, you really kind of want to have it somewhat static in nature so you don't have to reload and load again. So creating today a CSV of some sort and feeding in the CSV gives you the opportunity to kind of keep that static view of the data while you're going through your exercise.
So now I'm part of a session that I am very excited about, because these are the 301, 401 level data design challenges that often get missed. So we want to walk you through, once you defined your data scope, how do you make the right data modeling, data governance, data mapping, and harmonization decisions? What you want to avoid are the common data design missteps, so you can design it correctly the first time and you don't waste credits reprocessing. We also want to identify and tackle obvious data quality challenges that may lead people to question them. Let's take this specific scenario. Let's say that we chose 2 sources and 2 objects per source. In org 1, we have the account object with 87 custom fields and opportunity object with 341 custom fields. Fields on par, right? Org 2 has 122 custom fields and 238 custom fields. When we unify data in Data Cloud, we want to end up with a consolidated view of account, recognizing Acme and Acme Inc. are the same company. And we want to see a holistic view of all of the opportunities. Now, what fields should carry forward? What fields need to be standardized? What fields need to be mapped? What should we even call the field in our data model? These are some of the decisions that you need to make where, without looking at the right set of tools, your POC may take a lot longer and the end results may be questioned. Example number 1, we are using 2 standard fields. We have opportunity stage and opportunity type, and these have different values. Ultimately, we want to see them streamlined. Do we call the stage discover or qualification? Do we call the type new business or new customer? I'm hoping all of you agree you would want to know about this to make the right decisions. Otherwise, if you just rely on the automated standard field name to DMO canonical model mapping, you may inadvertently bring inconsistent data because you did not realize they have different values. We're going to show you how to do this. Second example is a little trickier. In one org, there's a field called segment that says enterprise. In the other object, there's a field name customer type that is a value EBU. Are these about the same thing? If they are, what should we name the field? What should be the field value? If they are not, how do we explicitly educate the downstream consumers of the information when to use what field?
And this is where we really want to kind of, talk more about the field naming and the things that are happening here, because segment is kind of a highlighting a marketing. How do I market to them? How do I deal with them in the data cloud context? Here, we're really talking about demographics, right? Some of the demographics about an account, which is similar to talking about that demographics as it relates to contacts or people.
And to play back for the audience, when Alan and I first had this conversation, he did pause like, isn't this going to confuse people? Because if we carry segment forward, then what about a marketer that's going to think, well, that's not how I think about segment. The reality is when your org is 5, 7, 10 years old, we don't know why a CRM admin named the field the way they did when they did it. What we do know is there's a field, it's a custom field with this name, with a set of values, and we now need to decide whether to use it and how to use it.
And to make it clearer for today.
Yes. So let's take a break from slides and let's go to the Data Cloud experience. Alan, can you verify you can see my Data Cloud screen?
I can, yes.
Great. Given the polling, most of you are doing something with either the free credits or you're in the middle of an implementation. So you already know that you can bring data from different sources, either using Salesforce connectors or the MailSource framework. You can ingest data from any source with significant data volume levels, and Data Cloud is going to give you a consistent view of all of your fields. And it is going to give you the ability to preview the data so you can get a snapshot of what that data may look like. In this case, this opportunity object has 182 fields. As I scan through this, some of these seems to be checkboxes. I see that depending on what's happening, I have some Japanese representation as opposed to English representation. Maybe different teams looked at it under different ways. But I see sampling of the information. Samples are insufficient to know what values show up in what frequency, what values are used more often, which is one of the reasons Data Cloud, as of last Friday, for any of you that did not know, has a data management category in the Data Cloud connection. Cuneiform for Data Cloud is one of those apps. In fact, it is the first app that launched under data management. And what it allows you to do is profile your DLOs in order to have a better sense of the shape. So if I look at that very same DLO that I was looking at in my Data Cloud preview, I can see that how many records it has. I can see a fill rate distribution to identify fields that are hardly ever used or not used at all to avoid them, eliminate them from my analysis. I can look at this at the field level, and I can even look at how many fields have distinct values and apply my own design rules that says if a field has 2 to 99 distinct values per se, I am going to need to make some level of a data standardization or data mapping decision. I can look at these details. I can look at any one of these items, let's say service delivery risk, picking one at random, and using a well-architected feature-rich profiling tool, you can easily see what values are showing up how often. And this is an essential step in any Data Cloud-like solution assessment. Now, one of the still challenges with this, if you're trying to do a rapid POC, is this object has 184 fields. Others may have 300, 500. How do you quickly look at the data to find potentially overlapping values across different fields, or see if the same field name have a different set of content? When we interviewed certified Data Cloud consultants, 10 plus of so peers, what they told us is historically they used tools like dbeaver plus spreadsheets in order to calculate insights, and then used it outside of Data Cloud in order to guide the right design decisions. On average, analyzing 10 DLOs takes about 4 consultant weeks. When you have an App Exchange solution, which is a part of the Data Cloud platform, it has the advantage of being native and secure with a familiar interface. It also has the advantage of having a well-defined data model that comes with it, so you can then create your own analytics view in order to analyze your data more effectively. What you see here is what one of my colleagues, Sebastian, built using CRMA in roughly 1 to 2 hours worth of work. And what we wanted to do was say that whenever we have sources or DLOs for the same semantic concept, which is, let's say, account, whether it says company because it comes from HubSpot, it says account from ERP, account from Salesforce CRM, I want to be able to look at all fields for that particular object and then quickly identify which fields may have overlapping values, and to quickly assess, do I need to do any data mappings to have a consistent value at the end? Do I need to make any data modeling or data governance decisions? So let me show you 2 examples quickly, and then have.
But I really want to highlight something you just said, Mehmet, about the data model. This data model doesn't exist in Data Cloud. It exists in the core platform that Data Cloud basically sits under. So in essence, you've done your assessments, you've done your gathering of data, of information based on the queries and the things you've looked at in Data Cloud and what the data you've brought in. But you've created this model to make it accessible, and the accumulated data inside of the core platform that hangs with and is part of the Data Cloud home instance.
To bring one more level of clarity, so the App Exchange Solutions data model sits on the core platform, so it does not use up any of the data cloud credits to persist and store the data, which means you can put any flow or analytic solutions that sits on a CRM object on top of it, simplifying your implementation. I just noticed the time, so I'm gonna speed it up a little bit in order to have some time for questions. Look, what I did is I just clicked on the first piece that said potentially overlapping fields. It is shipping state. It looks good, right? These are the 2-character codes, except apparently one of the sources have the full name of the state. So by being able to look at this, and I can see that because I have 3 sources, one of these sources is choosing to have, oh look, it is the dev3 environment, while demo 1 and demo 2 has the 2-character codes. The other one has chosen to do the full names. By knowing this, I can now map the full length to the 2-character code and make sure that I have a consistent set. Let me show you.
And you can build all of that reference data for any of these fields where reference data would be appropriate. So you can make sure the transformations, the translations are being done, so you get a consistent view on the far end of the kind of the data cloud, bringing it together.
Now let's look at a problem that is far more difficult to detect, because if you map same field name to the same target name, at some point you're gonna realize, why do I have 100 state values as opposed to 50, or 400 country values as opposed to 200? How do you detect when you have different field names but potentially the same value? I'm again looking at things about account. This time I'm going to look at populated values. I'm going to click on government first because it shows up as the highest. I see that it's showing under industry, customer type, and segment from our example. I know that I will deal with industry later, so I'm going to choose customer type and segment. And what I see here is both of these fields actually have the values government and nonprofit. And interestingly enough, I see values for small business versus SMB, mid-market versus CBU, enterprise versus EBU, and I have education, higher ed, and K-12. This is a real example from 2 orgs that had this type of value set up, and the complexity you need to tackle is recognize when you need to know about these things to make some reconciliation decisions. So let's speed up for the next few slides and get to questions. What you don't want to do is blindly map standard source names to a target name. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a mismatch of values that is going to prevent accurate results from coming in. What you do want to do is profile the results to make the right data standardization decisions. In this case, mapping USA to United States, mapping England, Scotland, and Wales to Great Britain. When you discover you may have 2 related fields that may have similar values, again, what you don't want to do is just copy them over, not realizing that they may have different sets. This is going to impact your reliability and ultimate business results. Someone is going to question it. What you want to do is decide what is the level of detail you need to capture. Do you just need to aggregate it, say government, nonprofit, enterprise, education? And like Ellen called out, segment may confuse the marketer end user, so we are going to use the field name customer type. But what if you don't want to lose granularity where it exists? You can still keep education as a top-level attribute and have subtypes for higher ed and K-12 when available. And maybe this will inspire someone to say, you know what, even for government, we should say, country, regional, and like city level. And this data modeling decision will persist over time. As you make your data content discoveries, you make your data modeling and data governance decisions, you want to avoid hard-coded mappings. If you want to understand how to do this right, again, please refer to the January webinar where Ellen walks through how he incorporates these in Flow. And make sure that you're using mapping tables whenever possible so you can enable bidirectional mapping and make the data consistently available both within Data Cloud and for Data Cloud consumption endpoints. As you do the right data design, taking into consideration data content differences, be mindful of data quality risks as well. If you see these values for these fields, you're going to need to make assertions on what they may or may not be. Just because something says NA does not mean it is not applicable, because NA is a valid two-digit ISO code for Namibia. So you should verify it is meant to be about the country versus not applicable. Whereas when it comes to phone numbers, you're going to make design decisions so you can identify verified fake information, and you want to eliminate them from your data processing. If you have a data unification rule that uses phone number, and some business rep or business team had a routine habit of using 5555 for phone number or 9999 for tax IDs, it is going to impact your identity resolution results and cause you to waste credits while ending up with worse data. The pattern for this: define in your data transformation rules both what to standardize and what to scrub, so you end up with the best second level DLO that you can before you enter the unification phase. And if you had more than 1 million records you onboarded, this is also where you filter it. Alan, do you want to go over this again really quickly, how you had made it happen?
Sure. Basically, all the stuff that you were talking about is taking the information that you're able to build from evaluating the data, creating the primary filters that are associated with that, creating secondary filters at the contact point level, or the data that's really important to get in here. And this was really focused on the identity resolution or account resolution, and then being able to merge those things together to bring it all together. So it's taking everything that we talked about and bringing it into the transform itself and making it all ultimately work with the reference data and filtering the data down to what you really want to have in the app.
Thanks, Alan. So
sure.
Look, at the end of this journey, you do the hard part, you bring the data together, and now you can do what you already know how to do. You can build the Salesforce CRM forms, you can build the Tableau reports, you can build the activation journey. And what you're likely going to do is quantify how much better you understand your customer interactions before versus after, how quickly you were able to build this proof of value that will give people confidence you can solve it again at scale. And you want to go back to that persona from step one, use case definition, and say, if I show you this view instead, what is your efficiency gain? What is your likely chance of closing revenue? That is the business value. As you quantify the business benefits, you want to do one more thing. Even though we had brought data in a batch mode, you want to bring one more refresh to see how much data had changed in this window. Maybe you spent 4 weeks, maybe you spent 6 weeks. You want to measure the rate of change for data volume. You also want to measure what kind of data content changes may impact your design. This is both going to help you with credit consumption forecasting, and it is going to show to your educated stakeholders you're going to be able to put in place mitigation measures to catch data changes that may impact design or that may cause reprocessing of data that most other platforms in the ecosystem, if you are building this from scratch with different technologies, isn't going to be able to help you with it. This is why we believe the Data Cloud platform with the product and App Exchange benefits is the best solution that's going to help you show your proof of value for an impactful use case, only using the free credits and GA features, and demonstrate benefits to your stakeholders. Haley?
We believe it's possible, yes.
Awesome. We'll get to questions here in just a second, so please submit them or raise your hand and go to, and I can unmute you one at a time to ask them. If you're interested in trying to profile your data and playing around with functionality Mehmet showed today, we do have 2 applications on the App Exchange. the always free Uniform for CRM Admin Edition, and then our Data Cloud application does come with a free trial, so you can get comfortable with the tool and the value that you can derive from that. So you want to tee up the Q&A slide, Mehmet?
Oh,
Oh,
I will tee up the
went
Q&A.
too far.
I went one too far. There we go.
So Mehmet and Alan's contact information is there if you want to connect with us after with additional questions. But the first we do have is a lot of this has been focused on that initial proof of value, and to get to that as fast as possible, you exclude bad data and you just kind of ignore some of the data quality issues. What is your advice when you do go into full production? That's no longer an option to just ignore bad data.
So we can spend probably a full half hour just on this question alone. I think the first step is, do you have repeatable steps to detect what bad data looks like? In my experience, we can often put in place a set of data quality KPIs or formulas on the key fields to monitor what's coming in or not. And when you detect a deviation, you can alert someone like a data steward whose job it is to be mindful of it. If it is about data cleanup in a source, if it is something that is going to impact the design, I used to get 5 different values. I now see something that is either suspicious or net new. I need to send it to my data architect or my designer. Depending on nature of the data content observation, different people can be engaged. The key message is you must profile your data to implement it right to begin with. Then you must monitor data trends to detect deviations, whether it's a data quality deviation or a design pattern deviation, to respond to it effectively and make sure that what is built on Data Cloud can continue to serve the value. And happy to dive into details at length if the...
Right. In bad data, we said fit for purpose a number of times. So when we start really getting down to it, is bad data is based on the purpose that it's meant for. So you're really focusing and drilling in on, okay, who owns it? What's the reason for it? Are people understanding it when they say it's bad data? So there's a number of things you have to consider in that when somebody is saying it's bad data. Is it truly? And then if it is, what Mehmet is talking about, where you really have to evaluate it, but make it fit for purpose.
Thank you for that. Next, we have someone that is very excited about a potential use case, but hasn't been able to find a persona to partner with. Do you have advice on identifying that right person for them?
So if the person is in a business function as opposed to IT, I think the answer is going to be different. What I did when I was in a technology organization is I would often reach out to the stakeholder who would benefit if this hypothesis is correct, which is the first step to verify the idea, right, in the methodology. And if they are excited about mitigating the risk, accelerating revenue, reducing service time or service costs, to say, who in your team is passionate about doing this right? Can I spend 15, 30 minutes with them? And this can be virtual, this can be in person, and I would go that way. I think that's going to be the most impactful way to get started, frankly.
And a lot of these bigger companies do have data governance organizations and people that are associated with the attributes and the pieces of data. And they're normally partnered well with their IT organizations. And somebody's seeing something happening in the system, they may be picking it up early, whether that be IT or in the business, but then, having that conversation or coming back to who can help and working with those people that can help are either normally already known because of the governance organization, or there's a lot of knowledge inside of these companies where there's just a feeling. And that's what a lot of business is there a feeling that something isn't quite right and can be better? And can we address it quickly and do some of the right things to bring the business to a better place?
Okay, and with that, we are over time and out of questions. So I just want to thank everyone for attending again. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.